My name is Rüdiger Wischenbart. I'm with Book Expo America as Director of International Affairs, and I'm really with great pleasure following. You see there are people that you can draw with the word dollars, euros, yen. I'm very excited about that brand new format of the translation market stage to be so well received over the past two days. And let me all tell you, we will continue to have that space next year and the years to come, because we see that not only in the debates on the conference tables, people argue about the rising interest in books that are translated. We also see it here, how many different aspects and how many different angles must be understood to make translation work. And one is obviously money. I'm serious now, I'm not just teasing you. Because over the last, I'm Austrian, and if you look across Europe, from Portugal to Romania, from Lithuania to Spain, the public domains, governments, private foundations have figured out that number one, many small presses, small medium-sized publishing companies are particularly relevant to bring translated books into the world. But these are the presses that very often have a problem to afford the cost of translation. And so those governments and the private foundations have started up grant schemes over the last 5 to 10 years in a quite significant number in order to promote this. But there is one hurdle. It's not easy for them to spend their money, because they need to bring together the original rights holder, the author or a publisher, a translator, and the target publisher, or someone who would then promote, distribute, disseminate that translated work. And Jana Genova, my longtime friend, and is from the Next Page Foundation in Sofia in Bulgaria, is one of those people who followed that development for a long time, and she knows and understands the tricks in a positive way that you need to understand in order to make those grants work properly. Because I guess, just as a few catchwords, the receiving targeting, the target publisher wants to keep full control over which books they pick. They don't want to just shop according to available grants, and yet they want then to lower their burden by working efficiently with those grant institutions. And so I would want to ask Jana to explain us a little bit, what are the nuts and bolts that one should better observe when working with grants? Jana, please.
Thank you. Well, you said almost everything that I wanted to say about the role of the support agencies. Just one little correction, perhaps. The title of this panel is about funding, and you talked about money, but these agencies do much more than just sitting on a pile of cash and distributing it. And for whoever works with support agencies, it's important to understand that they see themselves not simply as funders, but as facilitators in a long process of cultural exchange via translations. So, of course, at the end of the day, there are some cash transactions taking place, but aside from the grants, many national and international book funding bodies, as we have heard today, do many other things. They do a lot about translators, and I wonder what would happen with with translations from, especially from smaller languages such as, say, Swedish or Romanian or Lithuanian, with quality translations from these languages if agencies like this do not exist. So they would invest into capacity building of translators in various ways, doing workshops, lifelong education, if you wish, sometimes, providing information for publishers on novelties in the book sectors of their countries. Of course, you can see here there are examples of such support bodies. So the common things between all the support agencies, the first thing is that, as I said, they don't see themselves as purely as funders. So if you are engaged in a cooperation with them as a publisher or as a translator or as a cultural organization, please do think of that as a partnership rather than as just about a money transaction. Another common thing.
Can I ask you one about one element? You said they work a lot with translators, and I guess that's something that we understood in all these debates already over the last few days. That number one, it's not easy always to find the right translator, and number two, translators are very often organized in networks. What's the role of those funding organizations with regard to those networks of translators? Are they organizers of such platforms? Are they just a member of these networks? How is this relationship?
In the US or in
No,
general?
in
I
Europe.
don't think in the US,
in Europe.
The American Literary Translators Association does not have anything to do with these international or national funding agencies. But you can, as a US publisher, you can always ask for recommendations, say from Goethe Institute or from the Romanian Cultural Institute, to point to you experienced translators from their languages. Of course, sometimes there would be they will be reluctant. They will give you various options. They would never tell you, of course, this is the best translator from Romanian, because they work with public money, so they are obliged to be transparent and careful of whom they recommend. But I don't think they have any direct relations with the International Translators Association or with the European Translators Association.
No, the question was more practical. When I'm a small American publisher, and I already have trouble in finding the right translator for a book I've heard about from Albanian or from whatever, and then I need to discover everything about the translator, about Albanian. Is there Albanian funding available? Whatever, yeah. And so, is there a process where I can step into it, and then one piece gets to the next?
There are at least two things you can do. You can ask the Albanian embassy here, the cultural section of the Albanian embassy, if there is any funding available from Albanian government for translations. You can ask for recommendations for translators. You can check the website of the American Literary Translators Association. You can drop me a question if it's about funding coming from Europe. Europe not in the narrow sense of European Union, but also the geographical sense of Europe. You can also see on, for example, on the database, the 3% database of University of Rochester, which books were published from Albanian over the last 5 years, who published them, and who translated them. That's for a start.
Which is quite a lot, because if you need to find out all those pieces of information without these resources, you have a long way to go.
You can go on the Frankfurt Book Fair International Markets website and read a report on overview of the book publishing in Albania. For some countries, you can come to the Next Page Foundation website and read a report on the state of affairs of book publishing in other small countries in Europe, so that you can get an idea what to expect when you deal with business partners in these places, whether there are any literary agents, if they ask for an advance of €500, is this too much, is this too little? If somebody in these countries tells you that they're going to publish a translation of your book, now I'm talking in the other direction, in a print run of 500 copies, are they joking or not? Etc. So these kind of things to help you make your way through a faraway country.
And that brings me right away to my next question. Once you have established all this as a publisher, and you have found your translator, you have gotten in contact with that agency, whatever it is, public or private foundation, and they said, yes, we want to fund your book. Is this the end of the story? They do a wire transfer and never are heard of again? Or do they want to engage more?
First of all, because before they say, yes, we want to fund your book, there are other things that it's recommendable that you do as a publisher. Once you have a translator, once you have a title that you want to. And there is one maybe obvious things, but very often I see people skipping that step. And this is to very carefully read the website and the materials of these funding organizations. Even try to read between the lines, because they're very different in their missions, in their mandates, in their financial resources, if you wish. So very, very carefully, word by word, read what is there in their materials. And also it very much helps if you look at what they have supported already. What have they done? Which of your colleagues, fellow publishers got support from them? So this is the precondition. Imagine you have a funding contract. By the way, somebody asked me these days whether the contracts are signed between the publisher and the support agencies. Yes, rather than between the translator and the support agencies. But translators are your most important allies in this respect, because usually translators do know everything about the funding bodies, and publishers should really listen to them and listen to their advices, even get their help in preparing the applications. That usually helps. So once you get the contract, of course, as I said, because these are cultural organizations that do not just provide the cash, but they would be very much interested, all of them would be very, very much interested in what you can do about promoting and marketing these authors. So usually whatever commitments you make in your application as to the marketing and promotion, you are expected to fulfill this, and this would be monitored. Some agencies would support that part of the book life as well, so after publication.
I have to do something very unusual, and I have to apologize. I need to run to another meeting and leave you with Jana Genova. Her website is npage.org, and I leave you with one more question, but then unfortunately, I have to run away. The question is not so bad, so that's not the reason. Can you explain
Perhaps
a little bit?
The answer could be
No, it's a very, very for you, it's a simple question. Can you give us a few examples how these funding schemes that have been launched over the past 10 years in Europe, can you give us a few stories and a few examples how they impacted on translation? Thank you.
This was not that such an easy question, but I'll tell you later over coffee. Well, I don't know if everybody's interested in the impact of these funding agencies. I really cannot talk about the US because I'm based in Bulgaria. We work internationally in Europe, but I don't know what the impact of funding programs for translations is here. I see there is, of course, the number of literary translations here is growing every year. And I think the fact that these agencies exist has contributed a lot. But I cannot speak in numbers. In Europe, particularly in smaller and poorer countries of Europe, if you go to an independent bookstore and if you go at the quality fiction shelves, between 70 and 80% maybe of what you have there as literary translations is with some external, is published with some kind of external support. So it's not published on a purely commercial basis. These organizations are there to take some of the commercial risk that exists in publishing translations. Maybe it feels a little bit strange that I sit here and talk to you, lecturing to you about very practical things. So if you have questions and comments, if you're interested in any of the aspects of the work of these organizations, please go forward.
Can you just talk a few minutes about some of the languages that are most active in this area? I would assume that, like you said, the poorer countries that don't have as much resource. Yeah, I would assume that the countries that are most active in this would be the poorer countries that wanted to encourage the translations. Is that right?
Not really. You have the Goethe Institute over there. There is the French, also the French Cultural Institute that has a grant-giving program. The British Institute, the British Council, I think is the only organization within this network of foreign cultural institutes that does not provide grants for translations out of their language. Not only not here, of course, but in Europe. Almost every country in Europe does have a support scheme. They vary, of course, enormously. Their budgets are very different. For example, where I come from, the annual budget of the grants of the translation support scheme is in the Ministry of Culture is something like $20,000, which is peanuts. And this is supposed to back up translations from Bulgarian into all possible other languages for whoever is out there and wants to publish. But you have countries like Finland, for example, countries like Poland that has an incredibly well-structured, well-funded system of supporting translation exchange. So it's not just the small countries, not just the small peripheral languages that are trying to get into English. Another thing by which they differ, the work of this organization differs, is that you may not want to know about as publishers and keep an eye on, is that they wouldn't fund everything just for the sheer fact that it's written in, it was originally written in Polish or in Russian or in German. But they have different understanding of what literary quality that they want to support is. Some countries would fund only sophisticated high literary fiction. Other countries are other agencies are more flexible. For example, the Poles had for years a line in their support scheme for supporting best-selling Polish crime novels, translations of crime novels out of Polish, which for many other governments is something they would never do.
I may have missed this part of the discussion, but do you work directly with translators on projects? In other words, if I wanted to translate a book from German and I had the agreement of the German publisher, but no American publisher, does your organization act as a liaison between going in that direction?
If you are a translator in Europe, we can help you approach a funding body or find a residency program that is perhaps suitable for you. But if you are an American translator, I'm afraid I just don't have the expertise for that.
Any other questions?
It's npage.org. I'll give you my email address as well once this is finished. How we are going? We have mostly translators in the room, I guess, yeah? From small languages or from... Well, the German system of support is very well elaborated. There are different organizations, as you know. It's not just Goethe Institute. There is a lot in Germany itself, which is not the case with smaller languages. I don't know, do you know if out of the literary fiction published from German here in the US, what % of that was funded by Goethe Institute? Approximately.
I know that works translated from the German are now the second largest group of translated works. Since I work for the Goethe Institute, I should be able to answer that question, but I would say not even 50%, maybe 20%, maybe.
That's good enough. I mean, at my organization, we try to follow this and really find hard evidences for the importance of the work of this kind of organization so that we can help you as well to make the case for your next year's budget. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good fair and good luck in whatever you're doing.